Hi there, in this video I'm going to show you the 3 ways in order to do cluster interpretation. So here I have some data which is related to Spotify music album tracks. So this data has got the album name, it has got the album release date, as well as it has got information related to the artist also, like artist followers, artist genre, artist name, as well as other such information. Now I'm going to cluster this data. We are going to then interpret what does these clusters mean. So here you see the results of clustering, and I've clustered all the tracks into 3 clusters: the green cluster, the brown cluster, as well as the blue cluster. Now this visual is looking good and the cluster formation is also nice. You can easily see the separation between different clusters. But then what does these clusters mean? It is important to interpret these clusters. So let us look at the first method, which is overlaying some information over this scatter plot so that we can interpret these clusters. So now I have overlaid the information regarding the artist. So you can see that the name of the artist appears while hovering over the dots. So you can kind of see that this cluster corresponds to maybe the artists who are mediumly popular, and this one corresponds to the artists who are very popular, like Taylor Swift. So yeah, it's a nice way to interpret the clusters, but still it requires some eyeballing to understand what does the clusters mean. So let me now show you a better way, which is our second method, which is based on radar chart. So here you see a radar chart which will help you interpret these clusters. So each group in this radar chart corresponds to a cluster, and you can see that the blue cluster corresponds to the numerical characteristics which are very high. For example, this is a cluster for the artists which have a very high number of followers as well as very high number of track popularity. And then you have the green cluster, which corresponds to the cluster 1, where you have, let's say, the artist popularity is medium. And then you have the third cluster, which is this cluster 2, where your artist popularity is very less. So you can say that cluster 0 corresponds to highly popular artist, cluster 1 corresponds to medium popular artist, and cluster 2 corresponds to the artists who are not that popular. Now let us see the third method of cluster interpretation, and this is based on text information. So you can take this radar chart which I just showed you, and you can send it to a large language model, and then you can ask the large language model to interpret the clusters. So you can clearly here see that cluster 0 corresponds to the artists who are very popular, cluster 1 corresponds to medium popularity, and cluster 2 corresponds to the low popularity artist. So this is a nice way also to understand what does these clusters mean. So in summary, we saw 3 methods. The first one is overlaying some visual information over a scatter plot. Second is to use a radar chart for cluster interpretation, and then third is to use a large language model which is going to automate the cluster interpretation. I think all the 3 methods are useful. One is very visual, second involves some radar chart comparison, which is also good, and the third is based on large language models. So I think the best is to use all the 3 methods, which is going to help you to understand what does the clusters mean.